Hi, everybody. It's Erica from In the Company of Cards, back again with another Sunday conversation with a guest. We have Heatherleigh Navarre from Ferndale, Michigan. Okay, and she runs the Boston Tea Room. I want to ask you where you got that name from, the Boston Tea Room, because it's not in Boston.
It is not anywhere near Boston, and
Oh,
it is a little confusing. And I'll be honest, sometimes we do still get phone calls from someone who says, I'm trying to find you, but I can't figure out what train to take. And I have to explain to them, it's going to be a little bit of a commute from you if
yes,
you're in the Boston
exactly.
area.
Yeah,
We're
you won't,
actually in Michigan.
right. You
And I'll
won't get
make
there
the
on the
story
red line.
right. We're not on the red line. So, yeah, we're just outside of Detroit. Ferndale shares a city border with Detroit. It's known as 8 Mile. Some people have heard of it before. We're at about 9.5 mile, our shop. And we've been in Metro Detroit for over 45 years. And the name comes from the origin of the shop. My Uncle Phil's mom, my great Aunt Rita, was born and raised in Salem, Massachusetts, but spent most of her
Oh,
adult life in Boston. So Rita had that thick
yeah.
Boston accent, like pack the cat in the garage,
Like the cat, yeah.
Yeah. And when she retired, she moved from Massachusetts to the town we were living in at the time, which is Wyandotte, Michigan, which is just south of Detroit in the area called Downriver. And my aunt and uncle had a little family restaurant, and great Aunt Rita, because she was retired, would hang out in the restaurant. And when people finished their dinner, she would walk around from table to table and say, "Give me a teacup. I'm going to read you cards,"
I
you know?
love it. Oh my
That
God.
became so popular that they then had to, like, people came to the restaurant and would my aunt would say two for dinner, and they'd say, we're not hungry, we just need Rita to read our tea leaves or throw some cards for us. So they cleared out a little storage area upstairs, and the Boston Tea Room was born. And so it was Boston in honor of her origins, and it was Tea Room because she read tea leaves. She also did playing cards and tarot and some gypsy witch cards. So that's where the name comes from. And we just never got rid of it.
I think that's fantastic. Well, I'm having Heatherly here. We've known each other for a while as members of the sort of metaphysical community. And I think she's terrific. I will tell you that for those of you who are in the area, if you're in the Midwest, anywhere in the Midwest, right? Um, she has a conference coming up called GLADE, which stands for the Great Lakes Area Divination Experience. And I know a lot of you are not necessarily practitioners of these arts, but I know that a lot of you also are really interested in this stuff. So a conference is a great opportunity to really immerse yourself and experience what this kind of work is all about. Again, I'm not saying everybody run out and become a reader, but just even just as a consumer and an experiencer of this kind of thing, I think it's very cool. So if you are in the area, Heatherly, why don't you tell us a little bit about the conference first, and then we
Sure.
will talk a bit more about other things.
Yeah, so our shop has grown over the years. We started out, like I said, in a little storeroom on a second floor, and we're now in this location in Ferndale, Michigan that is 12,000 square feet. As my friend calls it, she says it's about the size of your average small Target, So it's a lot to dust. But we have 13 divination practitioners, so astrology, mediumship, tarot, palmistry. We do readings 7 days a week. We're a full bookstore, gift store. We sell jewelry and crystals. We have a full tea lounge with over 60 different kinds of organic tea. So, we really, the reason we've expanded over the years to this size is because we wanted to be a community center. So many people I've been running the shop for the past 22 years, 23 years now. And what people would say time and time again, and at first I kind of laughed about it, but people will come in and say, well, this is my sacred space, or this is my church. And I thought, oh, well, we're not that. But for a lot of people, we are. For people that practice alternative spirituality, this is a place where they can feel safe. Ferndale is a very diverse community. There's a really strong sense of advocacy on behalf of the LGBTQIA community. We are Detroit adjacent, so we have, people who come in from every racial, ethnic, immigrant background that you can name. There's a huge Arab community and Middle Eastern community here. So there are a lot of people who in other places in the world would be considered marginalized, who here we just call that Detroit,
Mhm.
but this can be a safe space. So we can host anything from candidate forums during election season to women's circles on one Saturday of the month, writers groups. We do drop-in meditations we've been doing for over 20 years, and we have some people that meditate with us every Wednesday evening. Just we want to be a community space. We have a community altar that is working 24/7. And then there are a lot of people who just come in because they like organic tea, and then there are people that will come in and say, well, I'm not really into magic. And I get that. And we're never looking to twist anyone's arm. But look, here's the deal, Erica, and you and I both know this. Anyone who, after Thanksgiving dinner, has pulled the wishbone with someone else at your table has practiced folk magic, has dabbled in bone reading and divination. And I think a lot of us, especially in like white Western culture, we have lost any sense of that. And so many immigrant families, as they came over to the States, lost the traditions of their magical heritage from their ancestral roots because it was all about assimilation.
Yeah.
And, here we're not trying to pretend that the assimilation didn't happen, but we're saying if you're looking to try and go back into your line and explore those things, this is a safe place to do that.
That's great. Now, I have had your tea. I think your tea is fantastic. So people can order
Thanks.
that online. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. BostonTeaRoomShop.com is our online store. And if you're interested in finding more about the Glade event, that's BostonTeaRoom.com/Glade.
Perfect. Good. Well, thank you. And I will put this information in the show notes.
Thank you.
Have it there. So, you know, when I approached you about coming onto the broadcast, I feel like Erica, you just have a little YouTube channel. When I say show notes, the broadcast, but anyway, that's what it is. Um, I wanted to talk about a particular topic, and I said, we can talk about anything you'd like. But let me throw this out. And I was perfectly fine with you if you had said, I would have been perfectly fine with you if you had said, oh, yeah, no, I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. However, you did not say that. You said, yeah, that I'm in. That's what I want to talk about. So um, one of the thing, and I get that a lot of you, again, come to me for, my political readings and my social commentary and all of that. But, the channel originated because I read Lenormand. I know how powerful it is and how helpful a tool and a friend it's been to me. And I wanted to show you what it could do in a real lived um, political, cultural context. So that's where the channel came from. Um, and I will say that what I brought Heatherleigh on to talk about is an observation that we have both made about people who are, um, what would we call it, very, very grounded in this work, very identified with this work, and this work meaning magical work, right? Whether it's tarot, whether it's runes, whether it's cartomancy, whether it's Lenormand, whatever it is, magic, um, are remarkably, startlingly apolitical
Mhm.
seeming. Notice I don't say that they're apolitical. I say that they're apolitical seeming. And I have to say that this really took me aback. I came late to this work. And so I would read about people like, Dion Fortune, who raised the cone of protection over England along with her fellow magical people in order to protect England from the Nazis. And I said to myself, I don't know, could that even happen here? Because everybody's so all over the place. could we even do that on a larger scale? And then it occurred to me, well, Erica, that's so cute that you say that because not everybody necessarily would want to do that.
No.
So
Mm-mm.
what do you think's going on, and what do you think this comes from, and what do you think the future of that's all about?
Okay, well, where it comes from is white supremacy. Let's just cut
Yes.
right to the chase. Like our society is built on white supremacy. For generations, the people in the magical practices who have gotten the most attention, publicity, power, the book deals, the publication deals, the media deals have been white people, right? It's been people who have benefited from white supremacy. For example, so we run a magical book group here at the Boston Tea Room. I do that with the help of my colleague V. Reedus.
Mhm.
And I wanted to have one of the books this year focus on the life of Marie Laveau, right?
Mhm.
The famous voodoo priestess.
Right.
She's really important to our shop. That's a whole nother story. But I was looking for source material, a book that we could read about her that was written by a non-white person, and it's really hard to find. That's not because there are no people of color who are interested in this subject matter. It's because through this legacy of white supremacy in this country, in the arts, in media, everywhere, it's easier for white people, usually academics who can pay for these advanced degrees, to get these publishing deals, period, full stop. And so that has continued, and it has absolutely continued in the publishing industry that governs the kind of magical realm, right?
Yes, I know that from personal experience. Absolutely.
100%. And so there are people in this realm, and if you're talking about where we gather these different events and places that we go, very often when you're doing any kind of spiritual travel, whether it's like a pilgrimage to your ancestral homeland, or whether it's a conference locally that has to do with, topics of spiritual interest, very often affluence determines who can attend these, people who can take the time off work, who have the money to travel, all these different things. So you end up with, kind of this like classist and often very racially divided group of people. And so if you're looking at the magical community and you don't have historical context, you might think that people in the magical community are white affluent people. And that discounts this whole legacy of where magic, and particularly folk magic in the US, comes from. And so, this is colonization, this is white supremacy, these are these ongoing legacies. And so what is the most visible is, let's just call it white magic. And I don't mean like light magic and dark
Yeah.
magic. I think white magic and black magic as terms to determine what is good magic versus bad magic is systemic racism at play in the terminology that we're even using. And I think we're moving away from that a little at a time, which is really great. But so that's what people see. And so it has been a safe haven for people to hide who have these white supremacist tendencies.
That's a pretty forward statement to make. And
Yeah.
by the way, it's not incorrect. I have been, I mean, I don't know, a couple few years ago I would have said, "Oh, really? Are you sure?" But, time has taught me that that's actually correct.
Yeah. I mean, we've met these people. We're not just going by their social media profile. We have met these people in the real world. We have heard what they had to say. We have listened to them speak from podiums, literal podiums. And so we know now. And, it really hit home for me when I started teaching on a larger scale than just in my home community and meeting people who, who I had really liked. I might know a little about them. Maybe they created a beautiful deck of tarot cards. And then I met them in person and something felt a little hinky and I
Mhm.
wasn't sure what that was. And then the 2015-16 election cycle came out and I started hearing what they were saying and I went, oh, that's what's
Oh.
hinky.
Mhm.
And here's the thing, I'm not afraid to be forward about that. I've been called shrill. I've been called a loudmouth white woman. I've been called all the different things. And look, we all have our different buckets of privilege, right? As a white woman, small business owner, I have a pretty big bucket of privilege to draw from. So I'm not afraid of being canceled. I'm going to be just fine. Am I wealthy? No. Was I a food stamp kid in Metro Detroit? Yeah. But I had benefited from some certain things. I was adjacent to Detroit, but my school didn't have as many systemic problems as some of the schools in the city, right? So I don't have any college education. I still remember my very working class blue collar roots. And yet, I can stand up and publicly say, hey, this is what's going on. And I know that even if someone does come for me, they don't have any power to harm me, right? And they're not going to be able to discount my voice in a way that someone who doesn't have some similar buckets of privilege might get their voice discounted. So, I've been able to use that to say, for example, if there is someone in the magical community who has published a book and I know what their material in the book is well researched and fairly accurate, if I know that that author is someone who's lending their money, mouth, and support to the dominant culture that's seeking to literally destroy myself and people I love, I'm not going to stock them on my shelves. I'm not going to bring that person to this community to spread their poison. So those are small ways that I can advocate on behalf of that. And I have the ability to do that, and not everyone does. So I think that's why I feel safe being more forward about it.
No, I think that's great. I mean, one of the things I know we talked about this a little bit off camera before I hit the record button is that one of my goals for my channel was to show people their own agency and their own aegis and um, the fact that they have a higher self in the first place, that the information from that higher self is accessible to them, and that there are tools to help them do that. In other words, I think that we say magical community, and there's a perception that that is a sort of closed group, um, private. It's for us to know and you to pay us money to, tell you what little we decide to tell you. And my premise was always that uh, there, is there a way to seize power away from that group by opening it to a way larger world, really?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
I mean, I've had people, for example, say they know that, and I don't know if you know this, Heatherleigh. So I almost became an Episcopal priest. Oh,
Ooh,
I got
I did
very far.
not.
Yes, I got quite far in the process. This was in Boston, and I had a wonderful bishop. He was a lovely old man, but then in the middle of my ordination process, he retired. So I had a new bishop. So that bishop said, you have to meet with this committee. So I went and I met with the committee. Every question they asked me had to do with race. Like, for example,
Oh,
how good a priest do you think you could be to me, a white woman? And I was like, I guess about as good a priest as you would allow me to be. She didn't like that. But every question was racial. I think I thought I acquitted myself well. I had done all the coursework. I had done everything. I had moved, and then she said, so I had to go back to the bishop after this meeting. And he said to me, Erica, this is the new bishop. There is no question but that we need you as a priest in this church. So I'm thinking to myself, finally, this one hurdle, now all I have to do is take a big exam and then I'm good. He said, the question is, because he wasn't finished, the question is, do we want you? Are we ready for you? You know what? Come back in 2 years. And it was as though, I don't know, I don't know. I saw, I don't know what color I saw, but I said to him in that moment, I won't be back. I won't be back.
Mhm.
And again, no shade to God. But there's a difference I have discovered between God, universe, spirit, and religion. So I've had people on my channel who know this background because I've talked about it a little bit. And they'll say to me, how do you reconcile your Christianity with your spiritual practice and path now? And I don't know that I would necessarily call myself a Christian. I think Jesus was a great guy. I think he was an ascended master. I think he was full of wisdom in the way that Buddha was full of wisdom, that the Dalai Lama is full of wisdom, etc. But I think that religion, for me, it's like all religions are just um, languages to talk about something that is ineffable and bigger and better and cooler than anything like, I don't know, streets flowing with milk and honey paved with gold. I think you could probably slip and break your neck on that. That street. So I think of religion, all religions, as languages that help us approximate what is real, but that's it. So that's what I do. And I think that what I love about these tools that we use is that we don't need an intermediary. We don't need a priest or a rabbi or an imam um, who maybe have very wise things to say, but we don't need them as gatekeepers between us and spirit. And that's what I like to show people and talk about. So I've thought, if more people knew this
Yeah.
and knew their own power and knew that they were um, always guided, guarded, protected, loved, I think people would live happier lives. I suspect, and so you know when I talk about Dion Fortune, who had this little group of people and they lifted up the energy. I mean, what if we were all like that? What if we all
Mhm.
said, I have this power within me. I come from God. I am made of love. Um, why not?
Right.
And that if we were to do that, one of the things that it would effectively do, I think, is wrest power away from people who say that they're the magical community, but
Right.
use it, as you say, as a smokescreen for being, you know, Trumpy, Trumpy, Trumpy.
Right.
And worse.
Well,
Not that there's anything worse, but you know what I mean?
I think there's a big, you can see the difference. And I think this has always been true with people who hold power and people who hold knowledge is the ones who are reluctant to release that knowledge and power and share it. Those are the problematic ones. Those are the dangerous ones, right? And that's always been true, whether it's in the scientific community, the religious community, and I believe it's true in the magical slash new age slash metaphysical community. When my family first started this, it was all about readings. It was giving readings for people. And the assumption was that most of the people who were coming to see us in that community, in the Wyandotte community, where every four corners was either three churches and a bar or three bars and a church, right? That was the makeup of that town. Most of our clientele at that time, I was a 10-year-old kid, but I know this from my mom and from the other folks in my family, it was majority Catholic women, church going, rosary reciting Catholic women who were coming to also get their lucky numbers and find out when their husband was going to get a promotion, because most of them weren't working outside the home at that time, and when they were going to meet their tall, dark, and handsome if they didn't already have the husband. And now this shift has taken place in the past 30 years or so, where people, they still want to get their reading, right? But they also want to learn, okay, how do you do this? And that's why we teach so many classes. And look, there's 8 billion people on the planet. I don't know about you and your Lenormand cards, but I don't want to read for 8 billion people. I want to empower people to read for themselves. I believe in tarot as a language as well, and a very empowering language. And if you look at the history of folk magic in the United States, it was empowering work for people who had been disempowered, who had lost their sovereignty, and to take more charge and control of their life, whether that was a placebo effect or not. There's no question that it was of value to communities. And I feel the same way now. There's a reason that Michael M. Hughes's binding spell on Trump went viral in, 2016. And there are huge communities of people that do that. So the 2016 election, I happened to be in New Orleans the day that the results were posted. I was attending a folk magic conference at the time. And so the election was on a Tuesday. And, so that night we all went back to our hotel room. And yes, I had absentee voted prior to leaving Detroit for the conference. And the next morning we attended a session with Mama Star Casas, who's a very well-known folk magic practitioner. And I'll tell you what, Erica, she was het up. She was not going to speak on what had been in the program agenda. She had new ingredients. She had new supplies. She walked us through the binding spell that we were going to do. She walked that whole group of people out to a crossroads in the middle of the French Quarter. We had tourists with giant, cups of booze watching us, and we all collectively performed a binding spell. And I've had people ask me in the years since then, well, it didn't work because he still did all this. And my response is, how do you know it didn't prevent a whole lot more damage?
Exactly. Exactly. I have this theory, and I don't think I've actually said it out loud, but or I might have maybe written about it on Substack. But I think when you look for example, the conservative blowback to against people who do this kind of work, period. That's the other thing. You've got the Christian nationalist um, movement and all that. I have a theory that all women, whether they know it or not, by virtue of birth, are witches. Again, I think most don't know it, and most, if you said it out loud, like I just did, would be like, "No, I'm not. What do you mean, witch? Am I ugly? What are you trying to say?" I mean, they don't understand. I mean, to my way of thinking, a witch is anyone who has the kind of power that we are innately given. We are healers. We give life. I mean, who else does that? Nobody. We give life. We lead people from the inception of life through life. We educate them. We teach them how to be in the world. We usher them into the next world when it's their time. And so I think the things that we do that are called, for example, I don't know, domestic work, the raising of children, for example, the keeping of a home, the caring for the elderly, for example, all of the healing of the sick, they're kind of relegated to, well, isn't that nice that they do that? They're not seen for the powerful art that they are. And that's not by accident, that's on purpose. And when we look at the systematic disempowering of women from the taking away of our rights that we've had for how many years now? I mean, since I was a teenager, Roe was around. So, my whole adult life. And now there are girls born today who won't have the same rights that I had I mean, that's how it's supposed to work. And I think that this systematic taking away of rights, or for example, what is it? Amy Comey Barrett. Now, listen, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. But, 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 but she is being demonized for having gone along with the majority who said, give back US aid. That money needs to be, it was allocated, it was voted on, allocated, give it back. And she voted with, along with Roberts, with the majority to reapportion that aid. Nobody's coming for Roberts on that.
Right.
You would think,
Right.
come for him. He's the supreme, the head guy. Why would you not? The Chief Justice. They come for her. Now, they're
Hmm.
not coming for her decision on Roe, which was a bad one. They're not
Hmm.
coming for her decision on getting rid of affirmative action, which was a bad one. They're coming for her because she's not in lockstep with what, and they're coming at her in these very sexist ways, calling her, for example, a DEI hire.
Right.
Now, what my hope is that I don't know if you saw the look she gave him at that speech.
No, I did not.
Woo, if he had looked in her direction, he would have turned to stone. I mean, she
Yeah.
was clearly, visibly disgusted. So I'm thinking, you know what? Amy could wake up and say, I'm a witch too.
Hmm. Well, I don't think that's going to happen,
No, but
and
I
I
mean,
think now.
metaphorically speaking, in other words,
Mhm.
understanding her power, not allowing these trolls to get in her head. It's not to the point where she says, "Oh, you know what? He did appoint me. I better vote the way that he wants." No, I think she will exercise her power by using her common sense and her love of the law and her understanding of the law to vote more often than she might otherwise have against him in cases where really, I mean, everybody should be voting against him.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, when you say, that you think that you sometimes suspect that every woman is a witch. I'm going to be honest. I don't want to claim every woman, to be honest. I want to leave some of them out there. I think that where it gets interesting for me, in the Arthurian legend, there's this one of the legends of like Gawain and the Green Knight, or maybe it's Galahad and the Green Knight. I'm not super educated in it. Like I said, I never went to college.
Gawain, that's what it is.
So
Gawain and the Green Knight.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And there's that story about how he had to find out what a woman really wants, and it took him a year. And this woman said this, and this woman said that. And finally, the answer is what every woman truly wants is sovereignty,
Sovereignty.
right?
Yes.
We want to be sovereign over our own life and our own decisions. And also, I think so many women have been served and benefited by white supremacy,
Yeah.
by sexism, by misogyny, that what they think is their sovereignty is really them, voting or making decisions based on their own self-interest and what they have been told is in their best interest by oppressors, colonizers,
Absolutely.
sexists, misogynists.
Absolutely. No, that is so true. I did a thing on YouTube where I was talking about Usha Vance and Melania Trump. And remember back when Melania Trump, people would say, Melania, just put a sign in the window, you know, help.
We'll
She
rescue
that
you.
wasn't going to happen. Or Usha Vance, who's so well educated, right? But standing by her man. And you're right. I think in both of those cases, they have done a cost benefit analysis and decided that to side with their oppressor, because ultimately that's what it is, benefits them. So they might not be where he is, but they're close to where he is, and everybody else is down here, and they make
Right.
that calculated decision. I would argue that those are women who, again, I will say, I think every woman has witch potential, but these are women, in my opinion, and I'm sure yours, who have abdicated that
Yes.
possibility or that option for themselves. You know,
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
I have people sometimes will come on my channel and say, just talking about these kinds of things is divisive. And I'm like, so let's say we
No.
didn't talk about them. Does that mean we're not divided? No, it just means that we're keeping silent and you are running the show and you're telling yourself a story that's not true, which is that we're kumbayaing when we're not communicating, we're not talking, there's no dialogue.
Right. And also, I like to keep in mind that, there are so many people, and I'm going to call out my sisters, I'm going to call out white women and just say there are so many white women who make the erroneous assumption that silence in these times and about these issues is neutrality. And
Right.
we all know that silence is not neutrality. Silence is complicity. Silence is violence. And, it goes back to, there was someone on my staff years ago, and the the first one of the first red flags, and I was trying to be really open about this, was I was talking to her about, she was going to be a psychic reader and she was going to be practicing divination. And I said, who are the clients that you find the most challenging? And she happened to be a white woman in her 40s at that time. And she said, well, Black women over 40 are the clients that I find most challenging. And I said, well, why is that? Why do you think that is? And she's, well, because I don't have any way to understand or empathize with their life experience. And I said, well, you're a white woman over 40, you're married, you have a child, you parent, you live in this world, what do you not? She said, well, it's just such a much different. And she had this like, she had projected the image of the strong Black woman onto every Black woman over 40 and was therefore intimidated by them, and had this whole, and I was like, but if you don't have an understanding of the Black woman's experience, you have a profound amount of media opportunities and literary opportunities to educate yourself about that. And also, you live in metropolitan Detroit, Michigan. So if you're somehow this age and don't have any Black women of your age in your circle, that's something to take a look at, right? And then years later, during 2020 and all the Black Lives Matter movement, she said, well, I know silence equals violence, but I'm afraid of saying the wrong thing. And I'm like, look, as a white woman, you're going to say the wrong things. How many times have I said the wrong thing? I have a Black daughter, I have two Black granddaughters, I have two Black great grandsons. That doesn't give me a pass on, unconscious bias and making erroneous racist statements without realizing it, and, forgetting to check my privilege, et cetera, et cetera. But you can't live in fear of being canceled by saying the wrong thing while injustices and deaths, while the body count keeps rising. And that's my issue with Usha and Ivanka and Melania, is the body count keeps rising on their watch. And let me just say, that woman no longer works for me, because at a certain point, whatever sheltering you were brought up with, it is your responsibility to stop it, to correct it, to educate yourself. And we live now in a global village where there is no excuse for anyone to not be able to educate themselves,
No, you're
and I
right.
think about,
I saw I to mention this yesterday, Trump said, I think he thought it was poetic the way he said it. So you of course you know it's not poetic. He said, our country will be woke no more. I'm like, what? Because what you're talking about is wokeness. Educate yourself. But the culture doesn't reward that. It rewards the opposite, the blinders on, you know?
Mhm.
I don't know. I love that my channel is growing, and I think it's because um, I'm saying what I'm saying, and I'm having people like you on who are, who are telling the truth out of your white mouth, which, I mean, I can say the same thing, but it's not necessarily heard the same way, because I can't say we, you can say we. And I think that that pronoun is so helpful. You feel so accusatory. When we say we, we're welcoming people in, and it makes them more maybe willing to open themselves up. Um, I forget what my point was, but I just I think there's so much reward given for staying asleep.
Hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Let me ask you this question. I had a conversation, it was on screen with someone, and it was about this white black um, divide between women. And so I said, let's go back to slavery. You've got a woman who comes from her father's house into marriage. Probably her father had to pay money, the dowry of some sort. And now she lives with her husband. Maybe she loves him, maybe she doesn't, but she has certain perks, um, like a beautiful plantation, like uh, beautiful clothes, jewelry, a kitchen, a dining room. She can give beautiful, elaborate dinner parties and doesn't have to plan the food, cook, or clean up. Just look cute. That's all she has to do. Life is good. Life is good, except for one thing. She looks around at these servants cleaning her kitchen, sweeping her floor. She didn't even have to go outside, in the house, and she says to herself, why are these children looking like my husband? Okay. Now, imagine any of us in that situation. What would
Right.
we do? We would raise holy hell, right? We'd pack
Hmm.
our bags and go home. Well, first of all, she can't pack her bags and go home because why? Her father just got rid of her. Now she's a mouth to feed. He's not trying to get that back.
Right.
Okay.
Hmm.
She could leave and go to another town and get a job. A job doing what? She is
Right.
unfitted for any kind of work. She doesn't even sew because, well, maybe embroidery, but the big time sewing of clothes and stuff that maybe could make her a living as a dressmaker, she's got slaves for that. So she can't even do that. Okay, so that's not an option. She can't leave. You know what? She's going to speak to him. And she's going to, then she realizes, no, I can't do that. He's going to say, look around at what you have. You're
Hmm.
going to complain to me about this. You don't even like sex. Aren't you happy that I only come to you when I need an heir and maybe a spare? And the rest of the
Hmm.
time is yours to do your thing and enjoy your life? Who do you think you are? If he doesn't, because that can happen too. So meanwhile, here's the woman, poor thing. And I mean it, poor thing. I feel bad for her.
Yes.
I feel
Sure.
bad for her because she's like okay, did you ever see that? It was a really funny photograph years ago about when Instant Pots became a big thing, which are really pressure
Uh-huh.
cooker. And this woman, she's like me. Let me tell you what she did. She had a new pressure cooker and she had been in the closet for a year, but she decided that she was going to use this pressure cooker. So she went and she got a hard hat, put that on. Got some goggles, put that on. Got some oven mitts that kind of go all the way up to your elbow, and got some long tongs because she's afraid. She knows this thing's gonna blow. It's gonna blow. Well, why am I telling you about an Instant Pot? Because it must have been like that for these white women. The pressure grew and grew and grew and grew. You can't run home and tell your parents. You can't
Hmm.
complain to your husband. So what do you do? Well, I don't know. Maybe some of them were anorexic. Maybe some of them drank. Maybe I mean, took a lover themselves, whatever. But I will say, probably universally, what they did is side-eyed those black women on that plantation
Yeah.
and
I
said
mean, it's
to them,
where we get the legacy of the Jezebel. A
exactly.
hundred
You
percent.
you lured him in. You lured him in. There is that enmity. Meanwhile, the black woman's just trying to live her life and not get raped by this woman's husband. This is
Hmm.
something that is never, ever, ever addressed. The fact that, although there's a beautiful book, I've recommended it before, I'm going to mention it here again. It's called Family by J. California Cooper. And it tells the
Okay.
story of a slave. Well, it's first person narrative. She starts out alive, but then she's killed, and she asks just that she be allowed to to witness what goes on with her children. She can't
Mm.
she can't affect anything, but she can watch and observe and talk. And she tells this story. And she's the one who says, she's watching these white women and she says, this must be really hard. Now, the thing is, we don't talk about it. And how do I know we don't talk about it? Because I have very few white friends. I have a lot of white friends, women friends, but we don't talk about race, which makes them
Mhm.
what my students would call associates and not friends,
Right.
right? Friends talk about this kind of stuff
Hmm.
and talk about that enmity, right? I mean, when you see graduation pictures like or parties, you notice how segregated the groups are. People will say, "I have black friends." Well, where are they? Because I mean, is there so many they couldn't fit in the picture? Because there's not one in the picture. What's
Right.
going on? But this kind of conversation, this is what will be called divisive.
Hmm. But it's not. And that's the thing. Look, I have some black friends, right? But what I tell my white friends is you don't get to say you have some black friends if they're all coworkers. Coworkers don't count. That's number one.
Right.
And my other thing is you may have black friends, and that may be a genuine friendship. And also, I believe that most of my black women friends will never feel 100% safe around me because there is such this deeply rooted societal systemic racism that I'm actively working to unpeel and get rid of. Trust myself not to say something stupid,
It
so
damaged
how
you
can,
too. Yes.
right? So if you don't have that acknowledgement, look, within our each race, I'm sure you got black friends, women friends that say something stupid to you about something else, and vice versa. We can unintentionally offend and hurt and harm each other on many
That's right.
different,
It's being
in many
human.
different
Right.
areas. But yeah, I mean, you got to be willing to have that conversation. And there are a lot of times when we just avoid it so that, because again, even in these friendships, we think that silence equals neutrality, and it doesn't. It's none of us truly believe that the issue isn't there. The issue is always there,
Woven through everything.
So,
Right. Right. And
mhm,
this idea of not wanting to say the wrong thing. I want to say this. Let's say you say the wrong thing. What happens next? Like
right?
what will happen? Like
Yeah.
what is your fear
Yeah.
about what will
The
happen?
worst thing that's going to happen is probably, if it's a true friendship, the worst thing that's going to happen is that you're going to get lovingly redirected.
Right.
You know,
Right.
that's what's going to happen.
Right.
And so what are you afraid of? That you weren't right? That's ego. That's not friendship, you
Right.
know?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I
And
think
it's,
it's such an opportunity for people in these days when we talk about Pluto in Aquarius, and I know nothing about astrology. So, I mean, but I've heard that term enough and I've used it a lot. Everything is being blown apart, not so that it can stay blown apart, but so that we can rebuild something better. So, what an opportunity we have to have these kinds of conversations. You know
yeah.
what I'm saying? To take
Yeah.
the chance of being told, wait, what? When you said that, that made me feel whatever.
Uh-huh.
And I hope that people do. I hope they will.
Yeah. Hope they realize that, you're giving that example of, plantation society. First, that's only 150 years old, that's number one. It's not that far in the past. And many of us, I'm Gen X, and I remember spending a lot of time in the homes of my female friends. I can't tell you how many fathers I heard actually use the phrase, I put food on the table. What more do you want from me? Right? When they get pushback from a housewife in that time or a working mom in that time about, well, I could use your help with the kids, I could use your help with the household. So that legacy has not gone away of men justifying poor behavior based on their status as provider. And whenever there's infidelity, all you have to do is pull up TikTok and you will see thousands of examples of women still sending side eye at the other woman rather than taking personal accountability for the man across from them who's supposed to be their life partner. So these are not past tense problems. These legacies, race issue or no race issue, perpetuate, and that's sexism and that's misogyny and that's classism, and we're still struggling it. So with this idea that with Barack Obama we entered this
Yeah,
post-racist society, it's all hogwash.
it totally is. It totally is. I mean, I really hope that what people feel when they watch this on a screen is that it's a hard conversation maybe to listen to. They can pause it. I think I have commercials in the middle, so there you go. They can come back to it. They can digest it in their own time, and then maybe think about their own lives and what part of this conversation resonates in ways that maybe are uncomfortable, but like a loose tooth, make you say, wait a minute.
Yeah,
Because ultimately, it's all about disempowerment. If you take race out of it for a minute, whose advantage is it for women to think this way, or for women to
right,
ignore, or for women to think about certain conversations that shouldn't be had for XYZ reason? Who benefits from this? And I
right.
think that really is a Pluto and Aquarius thing because I do think a lot of people are starting to say, wait a minute, wait a minute. I thought this, but now I'm starting to think this. And for people who don't think like that, who don't want to wake up, I always say this whole administration and the people who are behind it and all of that, think of them as a rat in a dark kitchen. So there's a
Mhm.
rat and the kitchen is dark. So the rat's chewing on the cheese or whatever, I don't even know. And you go in there because you want whatever, and you turn the light on, and there's you, and
Mhm.
there's the rat. Of course, you're going to take, I don't know what, a broom, a vacuum. You're going to try to, and that rat knows that it is in an existential crisis. Literally, it's you or them. And guess what? That is the point at which that rat is the most dangerous. When it will
Mhm.
bare all of its teeth and all of it. I don't even know what a rat has, but will do whatever it has to do. Call its little snake friends out, whatever it will have to do, because it is facing an existential crisis. And I think that the people who are um, supporting this administration understand that they are actually facing an existential crisis. So, that
Yeah,
expression, it's darkest before the dawn. I think
yeah.
we are in that dark period. And I had my brother on a few weeks ago, and he's saying, and it's a Buddhist thing, we are not promised the victory. All we're
Oh no.
promised is the fight,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And if we think that just by pulling a lever, something was going to miraculously happen, no, we have to go through this dark time. And even for those of us who get it, who all have gotten it the whole time, because we all come from source, and ideally we all return to source unless we decide to turn away,
Right.
we have to wait for people to catch up. And that
Yeah.
means we get to go travel through the darkness as well. It's not fair and it's not fun, but it's why we came here, right?
Yeah. And it puts me in mind of what I'm going to quote you quoting someone else because this came to me in your like email subject line a week or two ago, like water been wet a long time.
What have
Don't
been,
get mad that it's wet. Work on not drowning. And, that to me, I just keep thinking whenever I hear, particularly one of my beloved white sisters complaining about, do you know what he did now? And they're so outraged. I'm kind of glad that it's getting to this point because look, over the past decade, we've heard a lot about how strong and powerful Black women are when they're advocating for something politically and all this stuff, and how we as white women need to stop relying on y'all to save our butts from doing dumb stuff. But now I'm seeing this community of white women who are now outraged because their sovereignty is being taken away. And I think that's a miscalculation on the part of this
I
administration and this
agree.
power system, because now the Black women are starting to get some white people waking up and going, this is what y'all been going through? Yes,
Exactly.
we have, and you haven't been paying attention. How does it feel? Not great. Could you lend us your support, please? And that's what it's going to take.
Right.
So I just wish more people were waking up faster to the egregiousness of this. And I wish more people would stop saying, but what can we do? And kind of shrugging their shoulders, because there always has been a lot of work we can do on the ground.
Mm.
And like Desiree B. Stevens says, anything that the government has given you, they can take away. We're finding that now. They can take away in the snap of a finger. But what they can't take away is community organizing, which
Right.
brings me back to the magical community. We have power in numbers. We can do things. So that's what we have to come back to.
Absolutely. I saw yesterday a thing uh, about France, and I think I put, hold on, I might have kept it because I thought it was so clever. Somebody said, uh, oh, did I not keep it? No. It was about France, and they said, this shit would never happen in France. Why? Because they went through a revolution where the elite, the oligarchs of the time, said eat cake. Now she didn't actually say that, but pretty much
Right.
that was
Yeah.
the vibe. And they had a revolution over it. So it's not like it's one and done. We talk about epigenetics and which is
Mhm.
sort of the cellular memory that people have about things.
Mhm.
And I think in French epigenetics, they think back to that revolutionary time so that when there's like they did the government tried to what did they want to do?
Retirement age, when
It
they
was
wanted to raise
they
the
raised the
retirement
retirement
age.
age by 2 years. And you know what the French said? You know what? Matter of fact, let's retire right now. We're not working. You want the
National strike.
yeah, national strike. You want the garbage picked up? Pick it up yourself. And that little law that they thought they were going to pass, we need to
Mhm.
take a leaf out of the French book.
Right.
They were allies to us during the revolution. They have, people watched the Olympics and thought it was just so weird and so, listen, they've learned a lot about how
Yeah.
government works and how people power really should be the thing that runs government.
Mhm.
So it's as you say, it's the magical community and it's all kinds of other communities who
Yes, small grassroots communities, church communities, traditional faith communities, like all these book clubs. I mean, the Odd Fellows, the Masons, you gather a group of like-minded people with shared values, and you start seeing change. And they may take away an earned income tax credit for children or a child care voucher, but they can't take away a neighborhood that has gathered together to do their own community childcare for one another. So it's like, what can we do within our own communities to support our neighbors, to remember that we actually have neighbors? We're not just these little isolated pod people.
exactly. Well, I think that moving forward, we may not see the promised land like King said, but I mean we can. What did he say? I've seen the promised land, he said. I may not get there with you, and I'm of a certain
Mhm.
age. I may not get there with you, but I see it in a way that
Mhm.
back in the 60s, because, I'm old. Back in the 60s, when I desegregated a school, and it was not the easiest thing, I remember telling myself, I'm doing this so that other little girls won't have to go through what I'm going through. I'm doing this. And then who would have thought in a million years that we would be here where we are, right? And that's why the message is in our lifetimes, yeah, the moral arc of the universe
Mhm.
bends towards justice, but sometimes it boomerangs back.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
stands still, right? But it
Mhm.
doesn't mean that you do it for your children, you do it for your children's children, you do it for
Right.
generations that you won't even meet, they won't even know who you were. But that's why we do it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I am really glad that we had this conversation. I hope that it encourages more people to have these kinds of conversations, either in their own, with their own racial group or cross racially, because, white women need to talk to white women.
Yeah.
Because they're not
It's not your
hearing,
responsibility to snatch us up and fix us.
no,
It's
no,
our
or we tried
responsibility to
that. That
snatch
doesn't
each other
work.
up.
Yes. And so, what I always hope is even if these kinds of conversations set people's hair on fire, get the fire extinguisher, and,
Mhm.
and move on and have these kinds of conversations. You won't die if you say the
Right.
wrong thing. You might
Yeah.
die if you say nothing, but you won't die if you
Right.
say the right thing, the wrong thing. I think also another difference is, and I mean, maybe sounds like a nice rounded discussion, and I should end it here, but I want to say one more thing about tone. I think this is another thing. I think that white women are taught to modulate their voices,
Yes.
to smile,
Mhm.
to say things like, I'm sorry, but, and then say what they have to say. And that's not a black thing at all, at all.
Mhm.
And so maybe, one of the things that, I mean, and people might not even realize that. That's the other thing. All they know is that if a Black woman has strong eye contact or has raised her voice or talks fast or whatever, and it makes you feel uncomfortable, understand that, think of it as a foreign language that you have to learn, right?
Mhm.
We learned yours, you can learn ours. And our language, while it may feel more, I'll just call it power driven, powerful, will not kill you either.
It will not. And you just said something that I'm going to stop it right here, but my only response to that is just that, you know, if a black woman's response to fight or flight is fight, and a white woman's response is to fawn, that is where we end up with one of my personal pet peeves, which is white women tears. And that's a whole different Sunday conversation.
Whole different
So
conversation.
that we
Right.
don't have time for.
No, weaponized tears, we call that. Yes, that's a different conversation. But you know what? Maybe we'll have a conversation again. Because
I would
again,
love it.
I can't talk to everybody about this. I can get on YouTube
No.
and orate, but it's nice to be able to, to have someone else to talk about these things with. Because if they don't hear me, maybe they'll hear you.
Well, and I just want to say, I feel really blessed to have you in this fight with me, to be in this fight with you, to be able to have this conversation. I'm so honored that you invited me and thought my voice worthy. And to any of the white women who happen to be listening to, if I've hit a nerve, if I've angered you, if I've pissed you off, I'm a little bit grateful because I hope it does like have that loose tooth effect where you need to wiggle it around. And then when you're ready, I'm happy to have a one-on-one conversation with you. So I invite any listener whom I have angered to reach out to me. Give yourself a cooling off period first, please, and thank you. But let's have that conversation, because it is in our best interest to listen to each other, to learn from one another, and to face forward into this fight so that we can actually be more effective.
And
So
women
I
are
love you
very
so
good.
much.
Women are really good at language. I mean, we teach. children, right? How to use words. Use your words. We're very,
Yeah,
very good at language. And I think that, you know, Martin Luther King made a case. He said, we have not yet learned how to disagree agreeably,
right.
right?
Mhm.
And so that's a goal. That's a goal. It's just to have these conversations, you know. So Heatherleigh,
Yeah,
thank you so much. I'm so glad that you agreed to come on, and I will have you again. Um, I will put the notes. I'm going to have you send me an email with all of your stuff, and
I'll
I'll
do that.
show
I'll
notes.
do that.
And
All right.
yes, and if you are in the Great Lakes area, you all, what is the date of this event?
So the date of Glade, it's May 30th. It starts the afternoon of May 30th, which is a Friday, then May 31st, which is a Saturday, and June 1st. And so about half the people signed up so far are local. We've got people flying in from 12 different states so far. We've got a partner hotel, and we're really looking forward to just having some strong conversations with some regional teachers on topics of interest to a wide swatch of people. So check us out. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me.
Thank you so much. All right, you all, that was another Sunday conversation, and have a great rest of the weekend, and I'll see you next week. Take care.